Hi, everyone, and welcome to another episode of From a Woman to a Leader, a podcast dedicated to discussing women's unique challenges in the tech industry. I'm your host, Limor Bergman Gross, and this week I have a pleasure speaking with Elle Ramel. Elle Ramel is the Chief of Staff and Inclusion Partnerships at World Business Chicago, and she's also the head of their new gender equity office. Elle has an incredible background in urban planning, economic development, and advancing women in tech. And she's going to share her unique perspective on raising capital, negotiating better, and building powerful networks. So let's get started and dive right into the episode. Hi, Elle. Welcome. Such a pleasure having you here today.
I'm very happy to be here. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely, my pleasure. And I suggest, Elle, maybe we'll just start with how you got to where you are today as a Chicago director of Get Cities. Can you share a little bit about how you got there?
Absolutely. The more I've always been interested in cities. The word Get Cities has cities in it. I grew up in Chicago, which is a large American metropolitan area. And when I went to college, I didn't know what I wanted to do. So I was like, maybe I'll do something in business. And then I learned about urban studies and realized you could study cities and said, I want to wake up every single day and know that I've helped a city or a group of cities just be better. And so it's a bit of I feel like I'm cheating a bit because there are many city things in cities. It's a microsystem. But what
Mm-hmm.
I did is I started in the mayor's office of Chicago in economic development, and people always go, what is economic development? And, it really boils down to businesses and jobs. And so I
Yeah,
really wanted to help think about that. And one of the biggest things in that space is just the changing nature of industry sectors and how do people respond? How do businesses respond? So I was really involved in the Rahm Emanuel administration in Chicago there. And then really, I always say that in your 30s, you can just tell everyone it was very strategic, but in your 20s,
yeah,
it was really just who was the coolest next person I wanted to work for. And so I really found resonance with the chief information officer and the chief technology officer in succession, and ended up working in for them in the smart cities space.
yeah.
That got me more into cities and technology. And so
Wonderful.
Get Cities stands for Gender Equality and Technology. There was an opportunity to really help women and non-binary in the tech field that I had grown in. And I was offered an opportunity to lead that office in Chicago and couldn't turn it down.
Definitely. That sounds incredible. And I know that you are very passionate about supporting women
Hmm.
and non-binaries. So that's incredible. And maybe let's discuss about what are some of the I think, most significant challenges that you see, at least in Chicago, about increasing representation of women and non-binary.
Absolutely. So the Get Cities portfolio dealt with education, entrepreneurship, and workforce. The first one that comes to mind with entrepreneurship, we have an incredible track record of women starting small businesses or startups. Actually, in the United States, the majority of small businesses are started by women. One of the biggest challenges we identified is women, compared to men, receive about 2% of the capital allocated to tech companies. So for every $100 a man receives, women receive $2. So it's not a lot. And so what I saw as a challenge and work that I'm very passionate about is when a woman company wanted to be in the growth stage. So we call this pre-seed or seed. Let's say something between 500,000 and 5 million. So the 6 and 7 figures. Really, no capital was available in Chicago in that volume. I mean, capital is here, but the women that I worked with and was designing work with, they were not receiving that capital. And so it's very sobering, right? So women can start a company, but to grow it, to become these titans of industry, it's still a very difficult space for women.
Definitely. And this is not just in Chicago, this is kind of
No,
global, right? I mean,
this is very global.
it's more difficult for women to raise funds. And can you kind of highlight why? Why is that so? I mean, women are not less smart, and they are,
Yeah.
they're doing great things.
So don't quote me on this, but this is not a completely accurate perception. But I was in Menlo Park in the Bay with women in venture capital, and they said something to the tune of 90 to 95% of capital is controlled by male dominant firms. And listen, there's still studies out. We are not fully proven that if a woman is in charge of a firm that will necessarily indicate complete funding of women. But just I think when it comes to venture capital and more, it's a very specific type of capital where the funder really resonates with the person they're funding. I think the personality, and you can imagine the biases in
Yeah.
just, well, I just thought they were, they felt comfortable with me, and I felt comfortable with them. Often translates to funding men, and so women tend to struggle in that capacity. The other one is that some of the highest grossing startups tend to be in um, hard technology, hard science, coming out of corporate technology. Uh, One thing we found is that we wanted to encourage more women into those growing technology sectors because a lot of women are concentrated in consumer brands, which is something that can be positive as well. It just doesn't tend to resonate, let's say, with the investor community. And then I think we were talking at the last time about women exposure to investments and women exposure to negotiation in general. I
Yeah.
mean, I think you could bring this back to age 3. How are we socialized to think about money and gaining funding? This is something that I'm only learning more about now. So yeah, there's a variety of factors maybe against
Yeah.
us.
And definitely there are biases. I mean, I remember
Hmm.
at least one woman entrepreneur that I spoke with, and she told me like, well, just the fact that I'm a woman, and just that by itself is
Yes,
played against me. But still, I mean, that's my company. I wouldn't want to do it anyway differently. I don't want to kind of be hiding behind a man. But probably if I
absolutely.
did it, it was easier. That's what she told me.
I've heard two things. I work with women seed founders. I really learn from them. They were giving me firsthand knowledge of what they're going through. Two things. One time in negotiation tables, it'll go to risk mitigation for women. How are you guarding against this? How are you going to make sure you don't lose all of our money? And with men, the pitch is the opposite. Great. How are
Yeah.
you going to make us multiplier effects? When are we going to exit? There's this very negative and positive emphasis. And I've also heard this very hard truth of I have women founders I work with, they'll bring a man from their team into the room. I'm not even sure that, it doesn't even have to be a co-founder, but just some of those strange validators play into that.
Yeah. And tell us how you help those women change that. Obviously, they
Absolutely.
cannot
So,
change the the
right.
VCs, but what can they do differently?
Right. So, I think we provided some survey reports. We have a Women Seed Founder report, not just with the cohorts we work with. We work with 10 women every year. And we're using program design and user experience to understand what are they going through and how can we intervene. One of the most incredible efforts I think we're making, especially with Chicago, which is a very big corporate town, I think so much emphasis is on this pitching, like pitch on a stage, make this deck. I don't know if you've watched more other entrepreneurs, especially male entrepreneurs. They're going to a restaurant or they're going to a golf club and they're writing things on a napkin. So, one of the things we've tried to foster is how do we get the women founders we work with in high net worth spaces? How do we get them into private spaces where there's a sense of intimacy? So my work at Get Cities, we've been curating corporate executive and founder dinners. First, for the support, but second, one of the highest chances that a woman will raise into series funding is having a pilot or a corporate endorsement of a client. And so sometimes it might not even be going straight to the venture capital. It's saying, listen, these 4 pharmaceutical companies are behind me. They're really interested in my product. They're waiting for it to be on the shelves. And then ironically, that creates the scarcity panic in the venture capital space
Mm,
that can help. The other thing that we've provided is economic development is very city based, but I've wanted to challenge that norm and said these companies aren't moving from Chicago. They're here. They went to university here. They have their families here, but they're trying to find capital everywhere. And this is not different from any other group looking for investment. Real estate, they're finding Canadian pension fund money. They're flying to the Middle East. It's very global. And so another thing is maybe the market is a bit more conservative. So we've also fostered opportunities for women to travel in groups, supportive groups together, and meet with investors, say in Canada, in New York City, in Miami, to just broaden that sense of where they could find that capital. Um, I think it's very challenging, but one thing I've really harnessed is I think many of our ecosystems are very good at these incubators, but as these women grow, they don't have that sense of advising, mentorship. People think they're okay, but as
Yeah.
we've talked the more is you're never not in need of a mentor or sponsor. So I think also encouraging that support.
Yeah. So, kind of what I'm hearing from you, Elle, is it's a lot about networking and being surrounded by not mentors, but also like getting to know different people.
Absolutely. I think also even the power of peer-to-peer networking. I was on a trip to the Bay Area with two women founders I work with, and they were talking about how they were going to curate their board structure of their company. And that's not advice you're going to receive like by the internet, or I mean, you can try, but I think having and one of the women was farther along in her funding journey. So also I think that near peer mentorship of what someone is living through, how to navigate it as a woman. I also think it's important to have, I would say, broadly champions, whether it's on workforce or entrepreneurship. My partner city in Miami incubated a program called Get Champions, and it is really about how do high net worth individuals, even males, play a role in that? Can they endorse? Can they be an anchor investor? I think also the responsibility of thinking about changing the hearts and minds of the male dominant community as well. Because it shouldn't just be a philanthropic purpose, right? Like it shouldn't just be philanthropic capital. These are hard business spaces. But I think it's getting people in the room that have that perspective as well. So twofold, right? The entrepreneur, but then also making sure that there's diversity in the venture capital, but broader investment space.
Yeah, for sure. And you also mentioned like having few clients behind them. That's always kind of a challenge, right? Because
Yes.
you need the funds in order to develop your product, in order to get those clients. So it's kind of a
It's
chicken
it's
and
a
egg.
it is very complicated. And I think it's also important. One of the things we did at Get Cities is try to narrow down. They said we wanted a corporate partner and try to sort first a line on, okay, are you looking for a pilot? Are you looking for a customer? Are you looking for a champion? We've had some fairly good traction of even my work at Get. It's also important to identify the individual in a company that can make decisions: presidents, CEOs, C-suite, chief technology officers. And I've been very careful, but I've been working with a group at Advocate Healthcare, and they've been very supportive of not every founder, but sending one founder at a time, demonstrating what they're looking for, but also saying they're looking for a pilot, they're looking for a customer, and then that's easier also for the company to understand. Still a long tail, right? These are not. I mean, we've had some uptake in that interest, but um, again, it's a long tail, and that's why I think the capital component is important as well, because these companies can also burn out as they wait. And so I think that we try to do both the connections to customers and the connection to capital.
Definitely. And how can those women founders navigate those questions from investors about, right? They are usually asking women about how you're going to overcome those challenges rather than the positives, how you're going to make me money. What kind of things they can do? I mean, or is there anything you do in your program to help them navigate that?
I think that's absolutely important, and it's come up a lot. I think that if you think about those meetings, they go fast and furious, and I think that it really, we spoke about it comes to negotiation. We were able to partner with a law firm that specializes in structuring and capitalization tables, and even just having simulations. We ran a simulation with one of the cohorts last year of, okay, someone's asking for this amount of your company, what do they get in return, and even doing those simulations of, I think that's extremely important. Get Cities also helped to fund a program at 1871, which is a local incubator, also at Matter and M-Hub, so 3 incubators, we provided an investor in residence.
Hmm.
I think that's important because this is not so I wanted to challenge, I think office hours are great, but I wanted to say maybe this is a paid component. It's an investor. He has a family office and he's really enjoyed it because he can give very honest rehearsal practice, feedback, and have that sort of beta negotiation before you go in. I think when you are in the room, a couple things, challenging, right? They go to the negative, you go to the positive. Very much, I think about pivoting is really important because it does come up. And then, we could get cynical about this, but you bring your, let's just say, male board members or male mentors, or you bring your corporate champion who has invested in the pilot. And then, like you said, the power of the network, but the power of the allies, right? And then
Yeah,
it's almost like too much to resist. Um, and it is crazy. It's just, you get that first anchor investor and then all the chips, like everyone's like, okay, like they're okay. So we get try to, there's a term called badging, just providing some sort of validator, and even saying Get Cities is choosing these 10 women of note every year for this cohort. That can be important as well because it's saying, these are companies of note and they're led by women. Those are important too. So thinking about that, is it media placement? Is it conference stages? Uh, Getting a little bit of that froth started. So people are like, wait, I feel like I've missed this company. I really need to look back at them. I think is an important part. So it's that I just described a very daunting multi-pronged approach, but I think raising money for a company is a daunting multi-pronged approach.
definitely. Yeah. And you mentioned negotiation several times, and we want to talk about it. So,
Yeah.
share with us a little bit, like what strategies can women take in order to improve and become better negotiators, whether they're founders or they're just working in a corporate.
Absolutely. So I don't have the author off the top of my head, but one of the most powerful books I received in my work at Get Cities was called Women Don't Ask. It's out of Carnegie Mellon. It's a very
Yeah.
powerful book. Uh, Very specific, data driven, like why things are happening. And I think that's an important, I always turn earlier professionals onto that book for negotiation. And it really just hones in on some of the whys and some of the sobering whys. One of the chapters that resonated with me, and I really try to push against it now, this is more in an individual context. I just remember that there's a point around salary. This is more about salary negotiation,
Hmm.
but there's a certain number that women have in their head that's like the lifetime, the number they're going to receive at the top of their career. And I remember I told that number to my husband, and I said, "What's your number? Like the top salary you're ever going to receive in your career?" And his was 3 times mine. And I had to go like lay on the floor after that. I mean, that was that was sad. But if you think about that, maybe you're only negotiating, like if you're a founder and you're like, well, I hope I can get $25,000 in a pitch competition, and that's what you're walking through mentally. And a man's saying like, I hope I get 1 million, and maybe they get beaten down to 700,000, but you're getting beaten down to 20,000. So thinking about that threshold of what's possible, I think is a tune in negotiation. The other one that I always recommend, one thing I always talk to my teams is always ask me for a raise. I always will ask for a raise every year. Just the repetition of people getting more used to the negotiation and just just making it more of a routine. I don't think the muscle memory is built as much in women,
Yeah.
of the asking. I did some political training. The more I've explored different pathways of helping cities, taking that long drink of water, like making an ask and drinking a really, just not saying anything to caveat, to soften, putting the ask out there. But I think these are just, if we think about our socialized training, we just are not, we haven't been in these spaces. I mean, these are lessons I've learned along the journey with coaching and mentorship, with other powerful women that have taken me aside and said, I think you should do that again. Like, I think I don't know if you push that hard enough. I think that's important because it's, you see it, right? Like you see the deficit, you see people pulling ahead, and drives me nuts because it's just not been, yeah, I guess like the training or the implicitness of it hasn't been part of our time.
Yeah, I think that you mentioned several very important things here. Definitely, I mean, I think to women, as women, I mean, we allow ourselves in our minds, right? Much less than we should, and
Yeah.
much less than men. And this is
Hmm.
really important because what you set up in your mind is so critical.
Absolutely. Very tried and true story, but the man will apply for the job. Well, let's see. And the women will be like, well, I have to have gone to 3 schools and 10 mentors. And, uh, I think about that. I also think, I've been in some events with the words imposter syndrome come up. Women are like, oh, I feel like an imposter. I don't know if I can take that leap. I've actually thought about like writing something or an article or something of like, maybe we're all imposters, because one thing is I have been, I think, lucky or just learned a lot about, I've come from some male dominant spaces in government and real estate. And half the time I've learned that many times we're making a pitch or an idea, they're not fully baked, right? These are, you know,
Yeah.
they're not perfect. Um, and every time I level up in a job, I try to communicate to my mentees, um, I don't know what I'm doing for at least part of my job. How would I know it's a new job? And if they gave me the job, they must have, my logic is they gave me this job, so it must be okay, even if I don't know everything I'm doing. And so sometimes I want to acknowledge imposter syndrome as a movement, but I also want to say, like, maybe if we just all sat in the fact that part of it, we should all feel a little bit not confident when we're doing new things, maybe it would help embolden women. Like when you're negotiating, you should feel not 100% confident, because it's not guaranteed, right? People could say no. And so I think it's just like, I wish I could communicate that more, that it's okay to be nervous and it's okay to not know everything you're doing. Because if
Yeah.
not, it paralyzes us, right? We say, oh, I'm an imposter, I couldn't do that. And that's heartbreaking, because it's all learning.
Absolutely. I mean, and I just wrote a post about it this week on LinkedIn. Like, I have a client that she was considering some training and all that, and it's like, how much do you wait until you know everything and you
Right.
upskill yourself
Yep.
versus just taking a leap? And
Hmm.
every time you take a leap, or you even take a new job, could be a similar role but just a new company, you don't know everything, as you mentioned. Like, you have to learn, and just
Right.
accepting that that's the way it is, and that's okay. You don't have to know, you don't have to be perfect.
Right. I think another thing, when, we're talking about career and negotiation, the negotiation does not have to stop at the negotiation table. I think that's another thing, is like, always be open to constant negotiation, that, um, I feel like I'm always in a brain of negotiation, and therefore it keeps me flexible in it. But just because you committed to something doesn't mean you can't revisit. You ask for it. Let's say you go to the salary negotiation table and you say a number and they're like, amazing. And you're like, I know that was low because you were much too excited about what I accepted. You can revisit that in 6 months. Hey, they don't want to give you a promotion. Well, you can tell your supervisor, in 3 months, I'm going to be back and you're going to let me know what milestones. And I think there's a respect where you start to realize, if there's times where you can say, there's big negotiation and little negotiation. But if you're always constantly revisiting things that aren't working for you, I think whether it's getting funding or getting a job, there is I think, a way that I've noticed that you, even like your peers, start to respect you for saying, like, hey, that's, I like to revisit that. And it's not harsh, right? It can be very matter of fact, very, I'm also passionate about empathetic negotiation.
Hmm.
I'm always better when I've had one-on-one coffees with many people, and then it's almost, well, I've noticed, very Dale Carnegie, like How to Win Friends and Influence People, but
Yeah.
I noticed that you want this and I want this, and I wonder if we could figure that out together. And that is also a negotiation. Is it mutually beneficial to your investor? Is it mutually beneficial to your supervisor in some way? It might not be, but maybe the compromise is. Because if it's not working for you, it still needs to be negotiated.
For sure. And I'm a true believer in trying to find win-win, right? And
Yes.
not just a win-lose. So
Hmm.
it's about how do we kind of help each other and how each one of us wins, right? And if you talk about salary or promotion, like, if you get more money, you'll be happier and you'll do your job
Right.
better. So it's better for your employer. Or if you get promoted, you can contribute more. So
Exactly.
they gain from that as well, and they gain that they have a happy employee that will not leave.
And I also, one thing I'm very passionate about in my work is, with workforce, I think much of the emphasis is on hiring, because I think the belief is once they get a job, we're okay. This is not true. Um, Retention is very important. And I think that employees don't understand sometimes it is very hard to find new talent. So there is based on the market and how it's going, but typically you lose an employee, it takes months to find someone. There's maybe a search firm involved. I think there's an opportunity where employees, there's opportunities to negotiate because it's either that or you leave and then someone at the company has to find a new person. And so I think there's also that like part of it that I want um, women to be more empowered in the fact that their retention is actually quite a powerful strategy for their employer, right?
Yeah,
It is in the best interest of employers to have less hiring moments in time. And I think that's something I also kind of communicate. But one of the things I think is so important in my work is trying to bring more people to outside mentorship and sponsorship and coaching. We did a study called Why Marginalized Technologists Leave the Workforce in Chicago in 2022. And a third of the technologists in the women and non-binary space we interviewed had no one to strategize a promotion with. They were just sitting there by themselves. So there's two-thirds, but a third of the women were just unmoored. They had their job. We only had 51% happiness. So it's just they were there. They didn't know what they were doing next. And I think for a workplace environment that can't be ideal.
yeah,
And so it'd be great if everyone was like, wow, I know at least a couple future things in my company or in the city that I could take a part of. But it is sobering, right? So even like where are you negotiating to is a hard space for women.
for sure. And I think this is why it's so important to find kind of your own kind of board of directors, to meet like-minded,
Absolutely.
right? To find mentors or other people that you can consult with. As you said, like, I want to ask for something, I'm not sure, who can I talk to? It can be a man or a woman, it
Absolutely.
doesn't have to be a woman, but like, who do I actually consult with?
I also advise the individuals I mentor, you don't have to tell these people you don't have to sit down and say like I've decided you're my official mentor. You could, but I have people on my board of directors that I don't think we've ever talked about it. I just happen to call them, take them to lunch, send them Christmas. You have to keep up with them, send them the holiday cards. But very important to have different perspectives. You can't talk to your supervisor that way. And then maybe there's a mentor around family life balance. Maybe there's one about negotiation. Maybe one is better. I have one that's really good at employment agreements. I run all my, job offers through one of my old bosses. So I think that's very, very important. The other one I'm very passionate about is I was able to do the Women's Impact Alliance, which offered me an executive coach for a year to try. Sometimes, if you're not comfortable in the mentorship space, exploring a formalized coaching opportunity, that's a great way. Sometimes your companies can pay for it. Sometimes there are opportunities to different pay ranges, but that's getting a third space that's not your job and maybe perhaps not your family where your
Yeah,
parents are like, I don't know what your job is, is helpful. Your friends maybe are not the best at knowing how your job works but getting a place to practice that negotiation, practice that advocacy. I also think having people, the more you said, like you have to be able to know where you're going, like envision a bigger
yeah,
picture. And there's less of them, but having women that are in leadership, that are in executive spaces. Why would you even know if you wanted to be a CTO? If you've never met a woman CTO, it seems imaginary, right? So I think also the more I can bring speakers or connect women that have gone through the ranks and are, hey, I'm an exited founder. That's very powerful. They've sold their company.
yeah.
Hey, I'm a woman CEO and I've joined a board of a big national company. Even for me, that helps me. Like, where am I going, right? And it does thin out, right? 85% of first line managers in tech are men. And so you can see that the women thin out. And so finding those leadership role models, whether it's in your company or not, is very important.
It's important and it's not easy. I know that firsthand, right? I mean,
Right.
it thins out, as you said, and it's harder and harder to find role models, but there are women. So you
Yes.
need to just make the deliberate effort to look for them and seek out. Don't be afraid to reach out. I think that you mentioned
Yes.
mentorship, so you don't have to say, I'm looking for a mentor, but just say, hey, I'm
Yeah,
very impressed.
love to pick your brain.
Yeah, let's just chat and build that kind of relationship. By the way, I truly believe that in any relationship, both sides win. Even if you
I
feel
agree.
like you're always asking, a person that, for example, like you consult with on those employment agreements or whatever, I mean, by talking with you, I'm sure that they gain a lot and they learn a
Hmm.
lot from the challenges that you have. So
I
it's
also think, in general, I think humanity or humans, they enjoy being helpful. They also, I always tell this to people. Sorry, I'm going to plug in. They tell people that they enjoy their stories. How did they get where they're going? What are they working on? Half the time it's just a game of learning the most about the other person. And I think that can be very, I don't know, I am so curious about other people and it really helps. I also advise that get to know someone before you know what you need to do with them. Much easier asks later on if, hey, I'm raising a fund. Do you think you could introduce me to the
yeah,
family office? If you've known them for 3 years and you've told them, where the good sandwiches are in the city and they're like, it's just an easier ask later. So I don't even think it's about, I always say it's not just about, I think networking is, oh, like meet new people. I don't think you should meet new people until you can really maintain and culture your network. Like, who's in your network? Do you know what's going on with them? I mean, you should still meet new people, but I think that sometimes we lose sight of that is that those, that community, everyone appreciates that. Everyone appreciates that outreach on a birthday or like I said, asking about their kids. That's really important in the interim.
for sure. And just checking in once in a while, right?
Yeah.
And seeing where they're at and just sometimes offering some help or whatever,
Agreed. And
seeing
I think what you said resonated is even if you're early in your career, there are still ways you can help. There are insights you have. There are um, everyone in executive level is always looking for younger talent, right? Like you have friends. There's it's just active listening and hearing the needs. But I agree, it's very much a two-way relationship and making sure that as you grow your board of directors, you are serving it that way.
for sure, I agree with you. And for example, like if you are mentoring someone young, they can bring the perspective of either like your client base, if your clients are
Yes.
like that, or maybe if you're trying to retain employees, so they can give you a perspective of what does it
Hmm.
take to retain Gen Z employees. So it's like it's definitely everyone has something to give. I
I
really
will
believe
say
in
I've been
that.
at many lunches where it's how do we retain Gen Z
Yeah,
talent
exactly.
right now. That's been a favorite hot topic, I feel.
Definitely,
So
because they're different, and
yeah.
kind of the rules have changed.
Yes. I had a very funny lunch where the person was like, I don't know what to do with the Gen Z talent. They only want to do their job and then they leave. And I said, I had some people on my side that were more in like equity and workforce. And I was like, I think that's the point of the job. Like they're just braver, right? They're not just it was very funny. But I
For
agree,
sure,
having those different perspectives to offer, I think only makes you a stronger leader. So I do appreciate that. But it is, you see people in this journey, whether it's the women founders or women in the workforce, and just so many things that are applicable across just across both of those spaces. Also, I love my work because half the time the women in the workforce want to be a founder, and then some of those founders are like, I'm either tired and I want to go back to the workplace, or do you have any talent? So it's just a very uh it's really nice because I think this support knits together a universe of people that really are they're curious about everything. And people have assumed, oh, you're an employee. I don't know, they could be a future CEO. We don't know.
for sure. And before we end our call, I mean, Elle, is there anything else you would like to share that maybe I haven't asked?
Oh, that's a great point. um I think one of the things that I can think in my next push, I would say in my work is, and I'm excited about is I think we talked about some things that go through with women and negotiation and the founder experience. I think as people are listening and do feel to reach out on LinkedIn, I'm working on just understanding the best practices out there, right? When I recommend mentorship, when I recommend management training, best in the world, right? Like companies that I work with are curious. And so I'm looking forward to that as my next role is, we've heard these issues. We know they're happening throughout the workspaces. We know they're happening through entrepreneurship spaces. But, if I'm going to recommend one, investment advising simulation, et cetera, I know that's very technical, but I think that's my next foray is really just what are the best tools out there? Because I can only refer people as fast as I can, and I'm excited. I'm excited about that list.
That's very
So
exciting.
that's the kind of
And
the next vision.
And you mentioned LinkedIn. Anything else, if people are interested about what you do at Get Cities Chicago, how did they find you?
Sure. So there is my LinkedIn, so Elle Ramel, and you'll see it in the notes. And then Get City Chicago has now, exciting announcement, has merged with the Economic Development Group of Chicago World Business Chicago. So I can also provide
Definitely.
worldbusinesschicago.com, which is the space where it will now be called the Gender Equity Office. We'll be expanding into different sectors. So excited to engage there. Really exciting portfolio of work at World Business Chicago, even past my work that I'm excited to partner with.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Elle, for being
Thanks,
here.
Moore.
Really enjoyed the conversation.
Thanks for having me.
My pleasure. Thank you so much for listening to the episode with Elle Ramel. And before you go, I just want to give you a quick sneak peek to the next week episode. The next week episode, I have a pleasure hosting Drusilla Mugareva, and she's a former Rwandan member of parliament. And she will talk about building resiliency in face of adversity. So this is definitely a good episode for anyone who is facing adversity, and who doesn't, right? And she shares her really inspiring journey, fleeing persecution and becoming champion for diversity and inclusion in the US. And in the episode, she reveals her 3 secrets for women to break through barriers, get promoted, and become influential leaders in their field. So definitely don't miss out this episode next week. And before you go, don't forget to follow this podcast. Share it with anyone you feel like this episode is going to provide value to. And share any feedback you want with me, or anything about the episode, what you like, what you would like to hear in other episodes. Thank you so much for listening, and have a wonderful day.